Cowboy's mail-order bride arrives with a hidden talent that saves his struggling ranch. Jake Thompson looked out over his land. The late afternoon sun painting the rolling hills in shades of gold and brown. The wind whispered through the dry grass, carrying the faint scent of dust and cattle. His ranch had been in his family for generations, but lately it had been more of a burden than a blessing. The cattle herd was smaller than it had been the year before. The old barn needed repairs, and every month it seemed the bills kept growing faster than the income. Jake was a strong man, used to long days in the saddle, but even his strength couldn't stretch to cover the growing gap between what he owed and what he earned. He leaned against the wooden fence, brushing a hand across his sun-beaten face. The horizon was wide and open, but it didn't bring him the sense of peace it once had. The ranch had always been his pride, but now it felt like a lonely burden. His friends were scattered, most of them moving on to towns where life was easier, leaving him to shoulder the work alone. He missed having someone to share his life with, someone who could laugh with him in the evenings when the work was done. Jake had always been cautious when it came to women. Life on a ranch left little room for romance, and after a few relationships had ended badly, he had resigned himself to being alone. But loneliness had a way of sneaking up, even for someone as independent as him. That's when he saw the advertisement in a small magazine while taking a break in town, a mail-order bride service. At first, he scoffed. The idea seemed strange, almost desperate. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Maybe it was time to take a chance. Weeks passed as he exchanged letters with women from faraway towns and cities. Many seemed nice enough, but none felt like a real connection. Then came Emily Carter's letter. It was different from the others. She didn't talk about love at first sight or paint a picture of a perfect life. Instead, she wrote about her love for hard work, her curiosity about ranch life, and her willingness to learn. There was an honesty in her words that Jake hadn't felt in years. Something about her confidence and spirit made him curious. Finally, the day came when Emily would arrive at the ranch. Jake woke early that morning, feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. He made sure everything was in order, cleaning the house, checking the fences, and preparing a simple breakfast to welcome her. He rode his horse slowly toward the dusty road where he was supposed to meet her, scanning the horizon for any sign of a carriage or a wagon. When Emily finally appeared, stepping lightly from the coach, Jake noticed how calm and composed she seemed. She carried a small suitcase and in her other hand a portfolio rolled under her arm. Her eyes were bright and her smile polite but warm. Jake dismounted and held out a hand, introducing himself. "Jake Thompson," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Welcome to the ranch." Emily took his hand confidently. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'm glad to finally be here." As they walked toward the house, Jake studied her carefully. She looked like someone used to city life, her clothes neat and tidy, her posture poised. But there was also a determination in her step, a readiness for whatever challenges lay ahead. He felt a small spark of hope. Maybe she could handle life on the ranch better than he had dared to imagine. Inside the house, Jake showed Emily around. The rooms were simple, furnished with the basics that a rancher's life allowed. There was a kitchen that had seen better days, a living room with creaking floorboards, and a small bedroom for Emily to call her own. She moved slowly, taking in each detail, but there was a curiosity in her eyes. She asked questions about the land, the animals, and the routines of ranch life. Jake found himself explaining everything, from feeding the cattle to checking fences and maintaining equipment. After settling in, Emily unrolled her portfolio on the kitchen table. Jake raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" he asked, genuinely curious. "These are some of my sketches and notes," Emily said. "I've been studying farm layouts and livestock management. I thought they might be useful if you're open to suggestions." Jake blinked. He had expected a companion, maybe someone to keep him company, but not someone with knowledge about ranch work. A part of him was wary. He wasn't sure he wanted advice, but another part of him felt relief. Maybe this was the help he had been waiting for. Over the next few days, Emily settled into life on the ranch. She was careful and willing to learn, asking questions when she didn't understand and observing quietly when she did. Jake noticed small ways she improved things. She suggested a better system for feeding the cattle, rearranged tools in the barn for efficiency, and even helped with simple repairs. Her energy was contagious, lifting the spirits of the ranch hands as well. One evening after a long day of work, Jake and Emily sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was warm and the sky glowed in shades of orange and purple. For the first time in weeks, Jake felt a sense of calm. "You know," Emily said quietly, "this place has so much potential, you just need someone to see it differently." Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "I've been doing this for years, I think I've seen it all." Emily smiled, not offended. "Sometimes it just takes a fresh pair of eyes." Jake looked at her, realizing there was more to Emily than he had first noticed. She had arrived as a stranger, but already she was becoming someone who made the ranch feel alive again. He felt a strange mix of admiration and curiosity, wondering what other talents she might be hiding. The days that followed were busy. There were chores to complete, fences to mend, and cattle to check. Emily took everything in stride, never complaining, always ready to help. She even started keeping a small journal, noting observations and ideas for improving the ranch. Jake watched her, impressed by her dedication. He realized that her arrival was more than just companionship. It was a chance to breathe new life into the ranch, a spark of hope in the middle of his struggles. By the end of the first week, Emily had earned the trust of everyone on the ranch. Even the older ranch hands, who were skeptical at first, began to listen when she suggested changes. Jake noticed a change in himself, too. The constant weight of worry seemed lighter, and he found himself smiling more, laughing at little things, and feeling a renewed sense of purpose. One evening, as they were closing the barn for the night, Jake paused to look at Emily. The moonlight reflected off her hair, and she was focused on securing the last gate. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. She was no ordinary woman. She had something special, a talent that might just save this ranch from falling apart. Jake didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to face it. Emily had arrived with a simple smile and a willingness to help, but already she was changing everything. And as the stars twinkled above the quiet ranch, he wondered what other surprises this mail-order bride might bring. The quiet of the night wrapped around the ranch, but Jake couldn't sleep right away. He thought about Emily's portfolio, about her ideas, and about the small but noticeable changes she had already made. Something told him this was only the beginning, and deep down he felt a spark of excitement. Perhaps this unexpected partnership could do more than save the ranch. Perhaps it could also heal his lonely heart. And so, as the first part of their story came to a close, Jake realized that sometimes the most unexpected arrivals could bring the biggest changes. Emily was no ordinary bride. She had knowledge, courage, and determination. And in a few short days, she had already begun to turn his struggling ranch into a place of hope. The morning after the stormy night, the ranch was quiet, almost peaceful. Jake walked through the fields, inspecting the land. The cattle were grazing slowly, some still looking uneasy after the sudden rain and wind. The barn was a little worse for wear, a few broken boards and scattered tools showing the night's struggle. Jake sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He loved this land, but it seemed to challenge him at every turn. Emily was already outside, her boots muddy from walking through the wet fields. She carried her notebook and a small measuring tape, quietly noting things down as she moved. Jake watched her, amazed at how naturally she had adapted to ranch life. A week ago, she had been a stranger from the city, someone he barely knew. Now she seemed part of the land itself, attentive, curious, and full of energy. "Morning," she called, smiling despite the damp clothes and wet hair. "I've been thinking about the pasture. The soil looks like it's losing nutrients in certain areas. We could rotate the cattle and plant some new grasses to help it recover faster." Jake scratched his head. "You really know a lot about this stuff, huh?" Emily shrugged modestly. "I've read a lot, and I've done some small experiments at my uncle's farm. Maybe it can help here." Jake nodded slowly. Something about her confidence, combined with her humility, made him trust her. "All right, let's see what we can do," he said. Over the next few days, Emily began working closely with Jake. She introduced small changes to the ranch's routines, things he had overlooked because he had been too busy just keeping the place running. She suggested moving the cattle to different pastures to allow the grass to recover, reorganizing the feed storage for easier access, and even repairing the irrigation system in a way that would save water. The ranch hands were initially skeptical. They had seen outsiders try to give advice before, and most of the time it ended in frustration. But Emily didn't argue or insist. She showed them, step by step, how her ideas could make life easier. Slowly, the men began to follow her instructions, seeing the results almost immediately. One morning, Jake rode out to the far end of the pasture, finding Emily kneeling in the dirt, examining a patch of grass. "What's going on here?" he asked. "I'm checking the soil," she replied. "Some areas are too dry and the grass isn't growing properly. If we plant a few hardy seeds, it should come back stronger in a few weeks." Jake looked around. "You really think it'll work?" Emily smiled. "I'm sure of it. It just takes patience and care." Jake shook his head in admiration. "I've been working this land for years. I never thought about it like that." It wasn't just her knowledge that impressed him, it was her dedication. She didn't complain about long hours or hard work. She moved with purpose, always thinking one step ahead. Jake realized that having her around was not only helping the ranch survive, it was inspiring him and the team to do better. As the days passed, small changes began to show results. The grass looked greener in places where Emily had planted new seeds, the water in the trough stayed cleaner longer, and the cattle seemed healthier. Even the barn was beginning to look more organized. For the first time in months, Jake felt hope. One afternoon, Emily suggested they try something new, selling some specialty crops alongside their usual cattle products. She had noticed a small patch of land that could grow herbs and vegetables, something different from what the other ranches offered. Jake was unsure. "We've never done this before. What if it doesn't sell?" Emily laughed softly. "Sometimes you have to take a small risk to see big results. I can help manage it. If it doesn't work, we'll know and move on, but if it does, it could bring in extra income." Jake agreed, and together they started planting the new crops. Emily taught the ranch hands how to care for the plants, explaining the right watering schedule, sunlight needs, and soil conditions. It was a slow process, but everyone was excited to try something new. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, Jake and Emily would sit on the porch, talking about the land, the cattle, and even their past lives. Emily shared stories from her childhood in the city and her experiences helping on her uncle's farm. Jake told her about his family and the history of the ranch. There was a growing bond between them, built on trust, respect, and shared effort. One night, as the stars filled the sky, Jake realized how much he had come to rely on Emily, not just for her knowledge, but for her presence. She had a way of seeing solutions where he saw problems. She brought optimism when he had been filled with doubt. And slowly, he began to feel a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt in years. The next challenge came unexpectedly. A section of the fence had been damaged by a fallen tree during the last storm, and a few cattle had wandered into the neighbor's land. Jake and Emily rode out together to round them up. Emily moved confidently among the cattle, guiding them back toward the ranch. She used her calm voice and steady hands, showing patience and skill that surprised Jake. "You've got a real talent with them," Jake said as they walked back to the main pasture. Emily smiled. "I think it's about understanding what they need, just like people. You can't force things, you have to work with them." Jake nodded, impressed. He had spent years handling cattle, but Emily had a way of doing it that seemed effortless. He realized that her talents were not just practical, they were also intuitive. She understood the land, the animals, and the people in a way that complemented his own experience. As the weeks went on, Emily's ideas continued to improve the ranch. She suggested planting trees along the edges of the property to provide shade and wind protection, reorganizing the storage for feed and tools, and even starting a small garden near the house to provide fresh vegetables for their meals. Jake watched as the ranch slowly transformed, each small improvement adding up to something bigger. The local community began to notice the changes too. Neighbors commented on the healthier cattle and the organized fields. Some even asked Emily for advice on their own farms. Jake felt a quiet pride, knowing that their ranch was becoming stronger not just because of him, but because of the partnership he had found in Emily. One morning, Jake and Emily were working near the creek when she paused and looked up at him. "Jake, I have an idea," she said. "We could build a small pen near the barn for younger calves. It would make feeding and caring for them easier, and they'd be safer from predators." Jake considered it. "That sounds like a lot of work," Emily shrugged. "I know. But if we do it right, it'll save time and trouble later." Jake smiled. "All right, let's do it." They spent the day building the pen together, working side by side. Jake marveled at how natural it felt to have Emily there, sharing both the work and the vision for the ranch. By evening, the pen was complete, sturdy, and well-built. They stood back and admired their work, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "Looks good," Jake said, genuinely impressed. Emily smiled. "It's just the beginning. There's still so much we can do." Jake realized she was right. Every day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. Emily's knowledge and determination were opening doors he hadn't even considered. And slowly, the ranch that had been struggling for so long was beginning to thrive. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the fields, Jake felt a growing sense of hope. Emily had arrived as a stranger from a faraway town, but she had already become an essential part of the ranch and his life. Her hidden talents were not only saving the land, but also reminding him that even in the hardest times, help could come from the most unexpected places. For the first time in months, Jake felt something he hadn't in a long time: optimism. The ranch had challenges, certainly, but with Emily's guidance, it felt like they could face anything. He looked at her, working diligently in the field, and realized that she had brought more than just knowledge, she had brought possibility. And as night fell over the quiet Texas plains, Jake knew that this was only the beginning. Emily's arrival had already changed the ranch in ways he couldn't have imagined. The future was uncertain, but with her by his side, it felt brighter than it had in years. The quiet of the evening settled around them, broken only by the gentle sounds of cattle in the distance and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Jake felt a sense of peace. He had found a partner in Emily, someone who could help him not just survive, but thrive. And in her presence, he began to believe that the ranch, and perhaps even his heart, could finally be whole again. The morning air was crisp, and the sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange as Jake rode out to check on the cattle. Emily was already at the far end of the pasture, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust as she walked alongside the herd. Jake had come to admire her quiet confidence, the way she seemed to understand the land and the animals instinctively. But that morning, a tension hung in the air. Dark clouds were rolling in from the west, heavier and faster than anything they had expected. The wind picked up suddenly, bending the grasses and carrying the faint scent of rain. Emily glanced at the sky, frowning. "I think we're in for a storm," she said. Jake squinted toward the horizon. "Looks like it. Could be bad. We better get everything secured." They rode quickly back to the ranch, the wind pushing against them, urging haste. As they approached the barn, Jake noticed the smaller pens had been weakened by the recent rains. Some boards were loose, and a few gates were already swinging in the gusts. Emily leapt from her horse, pulling a hammer and nails from her bag. "Let's start with the fences," she said firmly. "If the cattle get out during this storm, we could lose a lot of them." Jake nodded, impressed. Her calmness made him feel more secure, even as the clouds darkened and the first drops of rain fell. They worked side by side, hammering, tying, and securing every loose board. The ranch hands soon joined them, following Emily's lead without question. Her instructions were clear, and she seemed to anticipate every problem before it happened. By mid-morning, the rain had turned into a downpour. The wind howled across the fields, bending the trees and making the cattle restless. Jake and Emily were soaked, but they didn't stop. Emily ran from pen to pen, checking gates, moving animals to safer areas, and even reinforcing the barn doors. At one point, a young calf panicked, slipping near the muddy creek. Jake reached it first, but Emily was right behind him, her hands steady as she guided the calf back to safer ground. "You've got a real gift with them," Jake said, shouting over the wind. Emily smiled briefly. "It's not just me, we have to work together." Calm hands and quick thinking, that's what keeps them safe. Hours passed, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. Trees bent dangerously, and the rain turned the soil into slippery mud. The cattle were restless, some huddled under trees, others trying to move toward the barn. Jake realized that this was the biggest test the ranch had faced in years, and he was grateful for Emily's guidance. At one point, a large branch fell near the main gate, blocking their way. Jake tried to lift it but struggled with its weight. Emily ran to the side, finding a sturdy log to use as leverage. Together they managed to move it, preventing a breach in the fence that could have allowed the cattle to escape. By late afternoon, the storm was at its peak. Rain pounded the rooftops and lightning streaked across the sky. The wind was so strong that it bent even the strongest trees. Jake was exhausted, his muscles aching from hours of physical labor, but he refused to stop. Emily's energy seemed boundless, and her determination inspired him to keep going. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the ranch. A tree near the barn had fallen, hitting part of the fence and sending a few cattle into the open field. Jake's heart sank. He knew that losing even a few animals could mean serious financial trouble. "Quick, Emily!" he shouted. "We need to get them back." Emily didn't hesitate. She ran toward the cattle, her voice calm but commanding. She guided them back toward the barn, using gentle gestures and a firm tone. Jake joined her, rounding up the strays, his respect for her growing with every step. After what felt like hours, the last of the cattle were safe in the barn, huddled together and shaking from fear. Emily checked every pen, ensuring that every gate was secure and every animal was accounted for. She turned to Jake, her eyes meeting his through the rain. "We did it," she said, her voice steady. Jake let out a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and admiration. "We did," he agreed. "I don't know what I would have done without you." The rain finally began to ease as evening approached, leaving behind a wet, glistening landscape. The ranch looked battered but intact. Jake and Emily walked together, checking the damages. Several fences would need repairs and a few trees had fallen, but overall the ranch had survived. "That was intense," Jake admitted, shaking his head. Emily smiled, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. "Storms happen. It's how you handle them that counts, and we handled it together." Over the next few days, Jake and Emily worked tirelessly to repair the damages. They replaced broken boards, cleared fallen trees, and strengthened the pens to withstand future storms. Emily's skills were invaluable. She knew exactly which areas needed reinforcement and how to organize the work efficiently. The ranch hands followed her instructions willingly, impressed by her knowledge and calm leadership. One afternoon, while working on the barn roof, Emily suggested a new idea. "We should set up a storm protocol," she said. "A plan for what to do if another storm hits. That way everyone knows their role and the cattle stay safe." Jake nodded. "That's a smart idea. Let's do it." They spent the next few hours drafting a plan, assigning tasks to each ranch hand, and preparing supplies for emergencies. Jake realized that Emily wasn't just helping the ranch survive. She was teaching him and everyone else how to prevent future disasters. Her knowledge and foresight were already saving them from what could have been a major catastrophe. As the days passed, the ranch slowly returned to normal. The cattle were healthy, the fences were repaired, and the barn was stronger than ever. Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude. Emily had arrived as a stranger, but she had proven herself in ways he could never have imagined. She had risked herself in the storm, guided the ranch hands, and ensured that nothing important was lost. One evening after the work was done, Jake and Emily sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The air was fresh, the sky painted in soft oranges and purples. Jake felt a sense of calm, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. "You handled that storm better than anyone I've ever seen," he said quietly. Emily shrugged. "I just did what needed to be done. You were there too. We did it together." Jake smiled, realizing that she was right. The ranch had survived not because of him or her alone, but because they had worked as a team. And in that moment, he felt a growing bond with Emily, built on trust, respect, and shared struggle. As the night fell, Jake thought about the future. The ranch had faced many challenges, and there would surely be more ahead. But with Emily by his side, he felt confident that they could handle anything. Her hidden talents had already proven invaluable, and he wondered what other skills she might bring to the ranch. The storm had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and shown them what they were capable of. And in the quiet aftermath, Jake realized that Emily was more than just a companion. She was a partner, someone who could help him turn his struggling ranch into something stronger and better than ever. As they sat together in the fading light, Jake felt a sense of hope he hadn't known in years. The ranch was safe, the cattle were secure, and their bond had grown stronger. Emily had arrived with hidden talents, and she had shown that even in the most difficult times, determination, skill, and teamwork could overcome any challenge. And as the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, Jake knew that this was only the beginning. The storm had tested them, but it had also brought them closer together. With Emily's guidance and support, he felt ready to face whatever the future held, confident that they could protect the ranch, care for the cattle, and build a life together. For the first time in a long while, Jake felt a sense of peace and excitement. The challenges of ranch life were still ahead, but with Emily by his side, he knew they could face anything. Her hidden talents had already saved the ranch once, and he was certain that they would continue to do so, one step at a time. And so, as the ranch lay quiet under the stars, Jake and Emily sat together, ready to face the next chapter of their lives. The storm had tested them, but it had also revealed the true strength of their partnership. And in that strength, Jake found hope, determination, and a renewed sense of purpose. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting a golden glow across the rolling fields. After the storm, everything looked renewed. The grass glistened with dew, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of cattle grazing. Jake walked through the pasture, feeling a sense of pride. The ranch had survived the storm, and for the first time in months, it felt like it could thrive again. Emily was already busy near the barn, arranging tools and preparing the pens for the day. She looked up and smiled when she saw Jake approaching. Her presence had become a constant source of energy and calm for the ranch. Jake admired her more every day, not just for her skill and knowledge, but for her heart. She cared deeply about the land, the animals, and the people who worked there. "Good morning," Emily said cheerfully. "I was thinking about expanding the vegetable patch. With the extra rain from the storm, it could grow well this season." Jake nodded. "Sounds like a plan, let's do it." Together, they walked to the garden, examining the soil and planning the layout. Emily explained how certain plants could thrive together, and Jake listened carefully. Her ideas were practical but also creative, turning a simple garden into something that could provide fresh food for the ranch and even some income from nearby markets. Over the next few weeks, Jake and Emily worked tirelessly to implement new ideas across the ranch. Emily's knowledge of sustainable farming and livestock management became invaluable. She taught the ranch hands how to rotate pastures properly, set up better watering systems, and even improve the barn's ventilation for the cattle. Every change, no matter how small, seemed to make a noticeable difference. One afternoon, Emily suggested something bold. "Jake, we could start a small dairy operation. With a few cows, we could produce milk, cheese, and butter to sell. It would bring extra income and attract more customers from town." Jake paused. "I've never done anything like that before. Are you sure it'll work?" Emily smiled confidently. "I've researched it and I can help manage it. It's a small step, but it could make a big difference." After thinking it over, Jake agreed. They started with a few cows, setting up a clean, safe area for milking. Emily trained the ranch hands on proper milking techniques and hygiene. Within weeks, the first batch of milk was ready, followed by homemade butter and cheese. Word spread quickly, and soon people from nearby towns were coming to buy their products. The ranch was slowly transforming. The fields were healthier, the animals stronger, and the income steadily growing. Emily's ideas, once new and uncertain, were proving successful. Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her talents had not only saved the ranch, but had also given it a chance to thrive in ways he had never imagined. One evening, as they rested on the porch after a long day of work, Jake looked at Emily and said, "I can't believe how much has changed in just a few months. The ranch feels alive again." Emily smiled. "It always had potential, it just needed a little care and new ideas." "And you were willing to listen." Jake shook his head, chuckling softly. "You did most of the work, I just watched in awe." Emily laughed. "We did it together, that's what makes it special." As the days turned into weeks, their partnership grew stronger. They shared responsibilities, planned improvements, and faced challenges side by side. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a home, filled with laughter, hope, and a sense of purpose. One afternoon, Jake received a letter from a neighboring rancher. The letter offered to buy Jake's property for a low price, thinking he could take advantage of the recent struggles. Jake felt a surge of anger, but he quickly put it aside. He knew the ranch was worth far more now, thanks to Emily's guidance and their combined efforts. Emily read the letter over his shoulder and smiled. "Don't worry, Jake. We've made the ranch stronger than ever. There's no way we'll sell it for less than it's worth." Together, they wrote a polite refusal and returned the letter. Jake felt a sense of satisfaction. The ranch was not only surviving but thriving, and he was determined to keep it in their care. The coming months were filled with small victories. The crops flourished, the dairy operation expanded, and even the garden became a source of pride. Emily's ideas for marketing the ranch's products brought in more customers, and soon, the ranch was known in the region as a place of quality and care. One morning, As Jake and Emily walked through the pasture, he realized how far they had come. The land looked healthy, the cattle were strong, and the barn was orderly and efficient. Most importantly, the ranch had regained its spirit. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't know what I would have done without you. You've saved this place." Emily looked at him, her eyes warm. "We saved it together, and it's not just the ranch that's better. I think we've made a life here too." Jake felt a surge of emotion. He had come to the ranch expecting hard work and loneliness. Instead, he had found a partner, someone who shared his dreams and helped him see possibilities he had never imagined. He realized that Emily had not just brought talent, she had brought hope, love, and a renewed sense of purpose. As evening fell, they stood together on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The ranch was quiet, the cattle grazing peacefully in the fields, and a soft breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and soil. Jake felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. "I think this is just the beginning," Emily said, resting her hand lightly on his arm. "There's still so much we can do. We can expand, try new things, and make this place even better." Jake nodded, feeling a sense of excitement. "With you here, I believe it. We've come so far already. I can't wait to see what comes next." Over the next few months, the ranch continued to thrive. Emily introduced new ideas for crops, improved the barn's structure, and even organized small events to bring the local community to the ranch. Jake watched as their hard work paid off, the ranch becoming profitable, organized, and full of life. The cattle were healthy, the fields were flourishing, and the home they shared was filled with warmth and laughter. The community began to respect their work, noticing the difference Emily had made. Other ranchers asked for advice, and Jake proudly spoke of Emily's ideas and efforts. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a symbol of determination, partnership, and resilience. One evening, after a long day, Jake and Emily sat on the porch, sharing a quiet moment. The sky was a deep shade of indigo, the stars twinkling above. The ranch, once struggling, was now a place of hope and stability. Jake felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for the ranch, but for the life they had built together. "You've changed everything," Jake said quietly, his voice full of gratitude. Emily smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "We changed it together. And this is only the beginning." As they sat side by side, watching the peaceful fields and the healthy cattle, Jake realized that he had found more than a partner in Emily. He had found a true friend, a trusted companion, and someone who had brought not only knowledge and skill, but also heart and hope to his life. The ranch was no longer just a place of hard work and struggle. It was a home filled with possibilities. Emily's arrival, once uncertain and unexpected, had become the turning point that saved the ranch and gave Jake a renewed sense of purpose. Together, they had faced storms, challenges, and doubt, and they had come out stronger on the other side. And as the stars sparkled above the Texas plains, Jake felt a quiet joy. The ranch was thriving, the animals were safe, and the future looked bright. Emily had arrived with a hidden talent that had not only saved the ranch, but had also brought them closer together. The struggles of the past months now felt like lessons that had prepared them for the life they were building. With a final glance at the fields, Jake squeezed Emily's hand gently. "I'm glad you're here," he said. Emily smiled softly. "Me too, Jake, me too." The night settled around them, peaceful and calm, a perfect ending to the journey they had shared. The ranch, once on the edge of failure, had been transformed by hard work, determination, and the talents of a woman who had arrived unexpectedly but changed everything. Together, Jake and Emily looked forward to a future full of hope, growth, and endless possibilities.